Well, first one is build a team that is bounded to each other through a very strong mission DNA. Nothing beats a Delta Force with a very strong mission that's clear to everybody.
Welcome back, everybody. Bruce Brubaker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Mission Driven Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm interviewing mission-driven entrepreneurs, investors, academics, the ecosystem about the work they're doing to leverage entrepreneurship and innovation to solve the challenges of environment, society, community that we face. And today, I'm extremely honored to be joined by JT Solis and his co-founder, Oochie Juan, who are two of 7 co-founders at Mayani. Mayani is a Philippine-based agritech that believes in a world where small shareholder farmers and fisherfolk can lead better lives because technology, community, and an overarching passion to cultivate positive impact can be brought to the world. And so, JT, Oochie, it's great to have you both with us.
Thanks a lot, Richard, for the invite. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, this is Oochie Juan from Mayani.
Okay, so as a starting point, it'd be great to know about each of you and what is the mission that you guys are on?
Our mission has always been to empower smallholder farmers and fisherfolk across the Philippines, precisely because we think that it's possible for them to be strong claim holders of rural development. For a sector that's actually contributing roughly, about 10% of our GDP, it's considered a cornerstone sector that feeds an entire nation of over 100 million Filipinos. I think what we've been seeing is that there's a huge irony that exists in the system wherein the very producers who actually feed this large, massive nation are considered the nation's poorest of the poor. We've imagined a world, and the Philippines in particular, wherein perhaps we can recreate the agriculture sector in ways that we never thought was even possible. I think what's at the core of what we do has always been this grassroots collectivization model in smallholding contexts, right? Because that's the nature and the characterization of Philippine agriculture value chain. So through that, we're able to create development interventions and hopefully make a dent in the sector.
When did this idea come about? What was the start of it? And how did you get 7 people together to start this organization?
Right. It all started from this vision of our founder and executive chairman, Jeff, who is a friend to all of us. And it actually started when Jeff got exposed to the realities of what agriculture is and what agriculture could be when they visited the Malarohatan Family Farm Association in Lian, Batangas, that's in southern Luzon. When they went there, Jeff saw that this is the situation right now, and there's a lot of trapped value inside agriculture value chains in the Philippines, and that trapped value is something that could be unlocked. Jeff started, building the team. Oochie being a farmer for over 3 decades, tagging along other people, someone who's an expert in software engineering and full stack engineer, myself with knowledge in e-commerce and logistics. We got a seasoned lawyer, top 100 lawyers in the Philippines, who came aboard, became our chief legal counsel. Everybody who had a different experience and something unique that they could bring onto the table, knowing that at the end of the day, a multifaceted problem requires a multifaceted team. Take it on.
Oochie, you're on the farm side, right? Like right now you're out in the rural area, you're working with the farmers direct, you come from that land. Tell me about the challenge that you saw, and then how did you articulate this challenge to Jeff and to the rest of the founders? I imagine a lot of them hadn't been on a farm, didn't know much about farming. Obviously, there's 1,000 challenges that farmers face. Did you focus on the one that was easy to discuss, or did you actually try and draw a map about how one is more important than others? Like, how did you communicate the size and scope of this challenge that you guys are going to work on?
So Jeff and I, actually Jeff is used to be our sponsor in our agricultural school here in Batangas, both in Lipa and here in Tui, Batangas, in Western Batangas. And then in addition to the founding spirit of Mayani, so Jeff saw sometimes in 2017 or earlier, he saw a dumping of tomatoes, wherein through his prayer, he has an inspiration. How can he help the farmers in nationwide? No, so because of the challenges, mismatch, and then oversupply of crops, just starting with that vision or inspiration from the dumping of tomatoes here in Luzon. And then when he consulted one of our friends, our common friends, the late Dr. D, a professor in the University of Asia and Pacific, he just mentioned, yeah, that's great that you want to help the farmers, but they are already helping the farmers, the children of farmers, through Oochie's connection with the family farm school. Of course, if you will see our video, it was taken here in Batangas. One of the challenges of the farmers are the high cost of inputs in agricultural operation practices. But whenever there will be the harvesting period, uh, the very low prices that we are encouraging or is experiencing rather. That's why with the spirit of helping the farmers, the team was able to organize everything so that to take care of the logistics, to take care of the fair pricing, that whenever there will be demands from the market, so we will have a marketing agreement or even contract agreement with the farmers. Whenever they will plant, there's a assurance that there will be a market.
What were the early days? What was the pilot? What was the first MVP? Because obviously, like JT, you're talking about like the logistics and the software. Like you already knew the problem. You already knew that you needed to match, help with the inputs, also help with the market side. What was the first pilot, or what was the MVP that you guys put together as a team of 7?
Remember earlier that I mentioned that we've always been about the model of grassroots collectivization in smallholding context. Coming from that genesis we're in, the relationship has already been established with smallholder farmers in Western Batangas, particularly in Lian. We started with MAFA Farmers, which is our first farmers association partner. They grow lowland vegetables. So we're talking about squash, eggplant, okra, tomatoes, native tomatoes that Oochie mentioned. The initial idea is there a way for us to be able to disintermediate in what we think is a very convoluted, highly intermediated, complex, inefficient agriculture supply chain between the farmer and then consumer. Simplify it, perhaps make it strong, resilient, but at the same time socially equitable for our partner farmers in Western Batangas. So given that agri-e-commerce platform on the demand side, our MAFA farmers on the supply side, we started moving lowland produce coming straight from our farmers. We did a weekly harvest cycle coming from them, looking at the programmatized harvesting cycle with them, looked at all the different crops that would comprise our initial assortment, started moving it to gated villages, within Metro Manila, starting with the moms. And we said, hey, would you be willing to try out our service, right? Here's the agri-e-commerce platform. Are you okay sort of just doing your fresh produce shopping there, and perhaps we can deliver it straight to you? One thing led to another, and COVID happened. I think couple of months after, the president declared community quarantines, which is our version of the lockdown, and that's when, wow, our order count and volume also went through the roof, and that has really fueled also our way of validating whether this is a service that can actually be scaled, and people are willing to part ways with their money.
Yeah, I mean this isn't the first platform to be built, right? Not in Asia, not in Philippines. So what is your business model? How's it a bit unique? And where are you guys today? Like, are you profitable? You're break even, still running at loss because you have investment behind you? Like, where are you in this journey?
A unique inflection point, Richard. Right now, we have developed a massive grassroots network of smallholder farmers across 7 regions now of the archipelago nation of the Philippines. We're able to engage a lot of these groups, so farmers associations, producer organizations, farmers cooperatives, etc. Now the direction of the company is really to scale up offtake in such a way that we can really create systems level change. For instance, building smallholder resilience in a country that sits at the #1 spot, according to ADB, vulnerable to extreme weather events. How do we provide them access to good inputs, quality inputs? And how do we also assist them when it comes to providing rural credit, because they are unbanked. Things beyond market linkage, but would really highlight a whole of value chain approach when it comes to creating systems level change.
But was market linkage like the original focus point, and then the other things are kind of coming in over time?
Yes, correct. So and it still is the core of the business, with the other services being bolt-on support services that are there to be able to help uplift our farmers beyond providing market offtake.
Ochi, quick question for you. Like, if you were a small sharehold farmer 10 years ago trying to reach the market, and let's just say the market is those gated communities in Metro Manila, how many steps was it from the farm where you're at right now to Metro Manila, and how much of the pricing was lost along the way?
Initially, the current practices in the rural areas, some farmers are working individually. Okay, so they'll plant, and then here comes a neighbor farmer who will do the trading. So there's a markup, and then another traders, and then another one. That's why what we are doing, we are organizing the farmers into cooperatives or into an association, so that we can easily talk with the association officers or cooperative officers, just to lessen the cost of the in between, the middleman or the traders. That's why what we are doing, as I've said earlier, we are helping them to compute for the production cost. That's why if you need that financial assistance, that will be your basis. And then for the security of their markup, we'll ask them, okay, if you don't have incorporated the labor component, we will add more 20%.
So, speaking about expansion, I'm open to either one of you jumping in on this. You know, there's kind of a school of thought that if you expand too quickly or you expand your focus too much, I mean, you're doing financing, inputs, market, platform, you have all these activities. How do you balance that, or how do you prioritize the growth? You know, like, and I understand as an entrepreneur, like, you want to solve all these problems and you want to move as fast as possible, but you know, as a team of 7, how do you discuss growth and focus and going too far and making sure we have the right resources? Like, what is that conversation? What's that dynamic like?
We've always reinforced among ourselves in collective discussions that this is a core driven business. And while we may be offering other development interventions and support, all of those interventions are in support of the core of the business. And everything revolves around that. And for us, it's about creating sustainable pathways to market, because we think that by and in itself, it's already a very strong anchor around which we could mount these interventions. I'll give a concrete example. For instance, there wouldn't be much need of an input of agriculture inputs or even better quality seeds, for instance, if we're not providing very good volume of offtake for these farmers. Otherwise, they'll say, well, just stop production and planting for the next cropping cycle. There's no need for inputs because we haven't even sold the harvest. We've just harvested, right? We just dumped it in the mountains because there's a glut or an oversupply. The same case for credit, right? The use case for credit has always been for production, right? These are production loans and they need it to be able to jumpstart a new cropping cycle. But before they even get to that new cropping cycle, you have to make sure that you're able to contribute in some way, be of value to them in the current cropping cycle. The biggest challenge of which is actually providing a market offtake season in, season out for them. So it's all in support of the core business. So having that framework and having that analytical lens through which we look at everything, all is in support towards that goal, right? That single big core goal of creating sustainable pathways to market for smallholders.
Okay, I want to switch a little bit to team dynamics, and then we'll get to funding afterwards. I think these are two big issues that a lot of founders I speak to are, you know, they I won't say they struggle with, but it's a regular topic of discussion, like big team, small team, solo founder, team founder, and then obviously funding to scale. I'd love to know a little bit more of the background on how the team came together. You mentioned that Jeff and Oochie kind of at the start of this, they brought in, you know, the other co-founders, but what did that really look like? And how long did it take? And how many of you knew each other in advance?
So as I mentioned, because of the inspiration of Jeff's vision to help the farmers. Yeah, as just JT mentioned, that I'm in the family farm school system, an agricultural system here in the Philippines that came from the system came from Europe. With that, Jeff is our sponsor, our collaborators with the principal to help the education of the children of farmers. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, that's the first time when he called us up, different people, the other six of us, and then the total of seven, we just met there. All of us knew Jeff. All of us knew Jeff. Yes, he's the architect. That's why we called him the founder, the our chairman.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And then what do you think, I mean, from your perspective, Ochi, what's the benefits of working with such a large team? And maybe what are some of the downsides? Like, do they all understand you? Do you have to like, is it frustrating sometimes? Like, how do you like, what's the benefits and what are the challenges that come away with, working with such a big team? And also one that you didn't know from the start, like you kind of learned about each other through pilot and now coming to scale.
Its talents or its skills of ours complement with each other. So me, with the contacts with the farmers, complement to the talents and skills of JT's business development, and even the other guys in logistics. The other two guys are in the technology, and of course, our one of our co-founders is the legal matters, and of course, our chairman supported and financed our operation. We humbly started as early as 2019. If you will ask, JT rode a bus, studied everything, slept here in our office, in the association's office, mingling with the farmers, talking with the farmers. That's the initial. We really started, humbly started in the garage in Metro Manila, near the office of Jeff. So that's the humble beginning from Batangas Farm, okay, from Batangas Farm to collecting and reorganizing the orders in the garage. So that's the humble the beginnings, and then
JT, what's your take on this collaboration? You came in, Jeff is like, "Hey guys, I've got an idea, and now you're going to work on it." When you think about your experience as a co-founder of Seven, what's it been like? Like, what's the benefits to you, and what are some of the challenges that have come along with it?
I'll answer that, Richard, coming from a basic fundamental premise that when it comes to building a company, execution is everything. Right? And because execution is everything, having a lot of people, very tight core military-like unit, right? Like a Delta Force, actually allows us to expand bandwidth, especially for execution, when execution is everything, especially when launching. Number two, very clear additionality right from the get-go. Imagine if there were only two founders. You'll obviously have a competence gap within your entire Delta Force, right? And so for us, it served us well, right? Especially at the time we're in. We really need to bring it from 0 to 1. And again, in the context of building businesses and entrepreneurship, execution is everything.
When disagreements come up, what's your process for making the key decisions as a group? Like, is it everyone gets a vote and 4/3 every time? Or is it, hey, we don't really get this, but we trust that you can get it done, so have fun?
We give absolute trust to our co-founders, especially in their area of functional work and specialization, right? So for instance, we really trust our chief legal counsel when it comes to like going through contracts, sifting through legal verbiage, right? But at the same time, when it comes to decision making, we go for very democratic approach, a deliberative democracy in terms of what type of a democratic approach. And then we come up with what we think is a collective decision that has been born out of a deliberative, democratic way of discussing these things.
All right, I'm gonna switch to funding. JT, you and I talked about over coffee when I was in Manila. You were just wrapping up the round, and you raise it at a time when impact investment has been kind of dry, in a down market for even for technology. in the wake of the e-fishery scandal, which probably didn't help you guys. Can you share a little bit about your round? What was it like? How long did the process take? And then, like let's just kind of follow it from there.
So I guess for us, when we got our very first institutional funder was the Asian Development Bank, right? And then we also got funding coming from the likes of JICA, which by technical definition, right, doesn't fit the venture capital definition, but were meaningful enough to actually help us out during our early days. Eventually, in 2023, we've announced the successful closing of our seed round. That's 1.7 million seed round. We had helpful investors, the likes of Plug and Play Ventures from Silicon Valley, Ag Funder. We have ADB, we got JICA, we have Atlas from Singapore, impact investors from the region, as well as strategic family offices in the Philippines. And then afterwards, we started looking at a broader spectrum of capital beyond just venture funding. So that's when Walmart's Ninja Cart came in, a strategic investor. And eventually, we're just super glad and grateful for the support of the Thematics Trust ecosystem, right? When they also provided us catalytic capital to be able to further scale our impact. And from there, you could see that by design, again, we go back to the very framework we've used when we were trying to understand capital markets and risk management moving forward for the long term. You can't be too dependent on a single monolithic kind of funding when there's an entire spectrum of capital out there, right? That's really ready and willing and able to help out.
So if you're working with Walmart, then you're not working with, say, mission driven or impact investors per se. Like, do you find that over the course of like looking at capital and finding new options that actually, I won't say that your story changes, but that your story maybe early on was a little bit more about the vision, mission of impact, and now it's about the economics of scale. Like, is there a story that's shifting, or it's always true, but it changes a little bit based on who you're talking to?
The predominant theme and the predominant nature doesn't change over time, Richard. Otherwise, we run the risk of having a mission drift. And if our cap table becomes predominantly too commercial, too growth driven, devoid of any mission DNA, then that's the risk, right? But it's a risk we've always been very intentional in managing early on by designing the coalition of investors in such a way that the predominant DNA is that all of them converge towards a certain mission, which is it's all about smallholder value chains in the Philippines and how to uplift that. But then it evolves over time in terms of just the peculiarities of the investors, right? So for instance, the one that you've reinforced earlier, Walmart's Ninja Cart, for instance, has always been in agriculture in India, right? But has always been a huge believer of technology being able to simplify, right, convoluted supply chains, right? For a large market, for instance, like India, right, pretty much like the Philippines. ADB, Maine, for instance, believing in poverty reduction, right, in Asia Pacific, but at the same time, a huge believer of smallholder resilience and that it's high time for the Philippines to capacitate our farmers to be able to adapt to these modern extreme weather events. So it's very clear and it's not going to change. I feel that the spectrum of capital out there isn't going to run out of mission focused investors who truly believe that we can repurpose capital and make it as a force for good.
All right, now practically speaking though, how long did this last round take? How many calls or pitches do you think you gave? And when you're like, what were some of the common conversations you had to have where you're explaining the mission, the model, and the potential for a partnership? I imagine some groups get it right away. Like there's some very knowledgeable impact investors, and there's some traditional investors who are like, they're not quite sure what to do, but they're actually really good potential partners. So, maybe how long did it take? How many people do you speak to? And what are the conversations like? Like how much 101 do you need to do versus how much like, look, this is our business model and they just get it right away?
Right. Our approach to fundraising, Richard, has always been share the story and engage people whom you think this investment theme will resonate with. It's hard to pitch to an audience that doesn't care to begin with, right? So we've always been more targeted. So rough number would be like less than 50 um, in terms of investors, because we wanted to look at an audience which we feel is already inclined to look at, consider, and hear these types of problems and the solution building that we're doing in this country. Second is the types of questions would almost always be a function of domain expertise. If you're talking to a specialist funder versus a generalist funder, there's a higher likelihood that you'll encounter more questions that perhaps need better elaboration and articulation from generalist funders as opposed to specialist funders. And that's where the filtering in the funnel becomes very handy. To begin with, we've always wanted to look at specialist funders who have been very explicit about them wanting to look at the Philippines, who believes that the next big impactful thing is going to come from the Philippines. In terms of timeline, it was quite long, Richard, because no one has been immune to this entire tech funding winter, right? And so in our case, I guess we are just lucky, enough to actually have had the support of a broader spectrum of capital providers, right, that allowed us to be able to somehow cushion the impacts of the tech funding winter, which largely impacted the venture capital space.
Sorry, when kind of filtering through those who'd be more inclined, does that lead you to more regional funders? Do you look at it that way, or you're like, let's go to London and to Switzerland and to New York because they have the more sophisticated structures, but then you have to spend more time actually helping them understand like the Philippine context. Like, what's the balance there? Because I mean, I've been kind of finding like we're localizing more over time, but I'm not sure if that's what you see when it comes to the funding side.
I think the first layer of filtering is more on thematics, because thematics can cut across borders. So for instance, smallholder agriculture as the investment theme. And so once we have that as the core and the primary filtering mechanism, then it allows us to actually look at funders coming from different regions across the world, not just in Singapore, perhaps some in Europe, some in some even coming from Africa, and saying, look, this is perhaps a better way of engaging them, because you jump straight into the thematics playbook, right? And you know already that they have some form of domain knowledge and perhaps a more holistic appreciation of what you're talking about. It's not so much about geography. I feel that that can come maybe later on into our funnel management, but thematics would always be the primary one.
You're still fundraising, which means you're still kind of building for scale. At what point do you say we're going to stop taking on other people's money and we're going to build this organically? Like, is that something that you're thinking about, but you're worried that if we do it organic, it's too slow, or you're worried about like if we blow out our cap table, we won't be able to raise next time? Like, how do you balance that investment led versus revenue generated conversation?
We're playing for the long haul. We're playing for impact here, Richard. We're not playing for exits. And so that's a huge difference. When you have that clear collective agreement that this is why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing right now, and how long is it going to take to be able to do this, and what would it take to actually achieve that, then everybody's on the same page when it comes to having this clear understanding that we're building a business here that's really meant to last and make a dent. And therefore, if we're building a real viable, sustainable business, which is the situation, the unique inflection point we're experiencing right now, right? We're turning a corner fast. And we feel that within the next year or so, right, we're going to be self-sustaining already. And that's the dream, right? That's the dream.
Oochie, I'm going to bring you back in here because let's assume that everything that JT just put out there succeeds. He gets all the money for you. The team builds a stack. You make the market. What does that mean to your farmers? Like, these are people that you know, your family, friends. You live there. Like, how does this impact them at the human level? And I ask that because I think that we often fail to remember or articulate why we're doing this. I mean, we've got the whiz bang cool technology. We have the climate resilience, but we don't talk about the human side enough. And I'm curious, what is it for you? What happens to the lives of these farmers when you succeed?
So it's very important that we are concerned to the farmers and the fisher folks, their dignity of their work, the importance of that, the work values, even the mindset. That's why on our side, we are concerned with the holistic approach of a person, of the farmers. It's very important that somebody is taking care. Aside from the economic development, of course, mostly we can assess, evaluate our impact through the economic. Not only that, our concern for their uh, dignity. That even though they are farmers, they are fisher folks, somebody are concerned for their effort, for their contribution to the countryside, their contribution to the human beings, to the Mother Earth. It's 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 a very important to them. After the meeting with the farmers, what they want: a bottle of beer, a cup of coffee. It's very important to them. It's not only financial, it's not only the orders, but how you value the person, how you value the people. That's why it's innate in us, with our co-founders, to help the poorest of the poor. And it might be our accountability to our Lord. How are we able to help and to inspire our countrymen? So that's it. Thank you.
All right, a couple more questions. Either one of you. What was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome in this time, the last 6 years, and how did you get through it?
I think believing in conviction over convention. This is a business that requires a lot of conviction that it's a sector worth pursuing. It's a sector with a lot of problems worth innovating for. And it's a sector that requires not just patient capital, but patient human capital and the heart to be able to see those aspirations to really come alive. It's a sector that by nature, it really takes time, right? You finance, for instance, a certain crop, it takes at least 90 days to actually see the output, right? And that itself, right, is really illustrative of what are the timelines that we're talking about for this sector and what would it take to really, create a dent. So having that very strong conviction over convention. So for the last couple of years, we've come to a point where, and sometimes we'll stare at the ceiling and think, is this, are we really doing the right thing? And we've had a lot of mistakes, right? By no means we've had a perfect journey, but what we're saying is we never. Those mistakes came in handy because we learned something from it. We gleaned a new insight. Those little experimentations actually enable us to say these things work, these things didn't work, and therefore serve this strong iterative cycle, dynamic learning experience that it's informing how our next decision is gonna look like, our next move is gonna look like. But at the end of the day, the destination shouldn't change. The pathway may somehow wiggle a bit, right? It may be a bit more challenging than what you've expected. But as long as the direction's very clear, I think that's the most important thing. And luckily for us, we've never questioned that this is the direction we want to take, right? So very strong conviction over convention.
That's awesome. All right, last question. 2 to 3 pieces of advice for an aspiring entrepreneur who sees a problem in the world that they want to solve with a gang of 7 or a Delta Force, as JT calls it. What are your 2 or 3 pieces of advice for them?
Well, first one is build a team that is bounded to each other, through a very strong mission DNA, right? I think nothing beats a Delta Force with a very strong mission that's clear to everybody. You have a single mission. This is our mission. Let's go for it, right? Let's fulfill the mission. I think second is the value of partnership ecosystems that you can build. Don't do solitary plays, right? You can only do so much, but when you're able to harness and leverage resources from like-minded partners, collaborators, never be afraid to actually ask even bigger entities to actually help out, because you'll never know, right? They might be the next, not just funders, but big strategic partners for you guys, right? This is a huge sector, and I doubt that any single player playing alone can even solve the multitude of problems that the sector has to offer. Third is, always have a more holistic view of development, right? And that's why I was smiling earlier when Oochie was mentioning about this whole dignified approach to development. It reminds me of Amartya Sen's book, Development is Freedom, that development is more than just dollars and cents that actually go to a person. It's also about their ability to actually socialize and have a sense of self-esteem, which really resonates with what we're doing, because we're building agency for these rural smallholders, and we're giving them access to opportunities and resources such that they can become strong and integral claim holders of real development at the grassroots. I think that's very, very important. So that holistic framework and view of what development really means to a rural smallholder.
Oochie, any piece of advice for an entrepreneur?
From our side as co-founders, the 7 of us, it should be very clear to us the mission goal of the company, and even we can transcend it and go down to the employees. So at least they should also imbibe what are the mission goal. In fact, we have some staff in the offices that really also supports the mission goal of the company. Second, of course, the as mentioned also, as I have mentioned earlier, of course, the concern to our farmers, to concern to our rural boards, fisherfolks and farmers, it's very important. The holistic approach, as JT mentioned, that we are really concerned with them. The third one, of course, is the economic development of our farmers, the fisherfolks, and even our concern to the clients. So because, as I have mentioned, even we are teaching the work values to our farmers, so that what they are doing is really correct. They are doing is not foul, because they can plant, put pesticide and everything, but that's not correct. So that's the idea. So we are also concerned not only with the farmers, even with our clients. So that's it. Thank you.